Welcome back to the Essentially You podcast, all about reinventing your health with safer, cheaper, more effective natural solutions and powerful lifestyle changes so that you become the CEO of your health. I am your host, Dr. Marisa Snyder. Are you experiencing symptoms of hormonal imbalance, but you are not quite sure which hormone or hormones are to blame and want to explore the root cause for why you are feeling tired, anxious, stressed, foggy, struggling with low libido, just to name a few signs and symptoms? If so, you are in the right place. Today is Q&A Friday, and I'm addressing a question that I get at least once per day, and it's all about lab testing. Today's question was sent in by Brenda Torres. Brenda reached out to me because she knows she's struggling with hormone issues at the age of 43 and wants to know where to focus. Here is Brenda's question. Dr. Marisa, which labs should I be requesting to get from my doctor because I'm struggling with hormone issues? I am 43 and not sure where to start. This is such a great question for many reasons. For many of us, testing our hormones and tracking our menstrual cycle is something that we were simply not taught to look deep into. Even though research demonstrates that irregular menstrual cycles and even crazy perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms are key indicators that something is potentially off in our bodies. For years, we have been told that our symptoms are normal and to just ignore them. I have personally been told that more than once, especially when it actually mattered. And I have a feeling you have been told that too. Today is the day when we do not normalize your symptoms. Because here's the deal. Our symptoms are 100% an indicator that we need to look at some of the biggest root causes that drive hormonal imbalance. And I have spent time talking about these root causes on other podcast episodes, but I want to list them out very quickly for you today. Stress, trauma, toxins, gut distress, pathogens like candida, bacteria, and viruses, and nutrient deficiencies. And just take nutrient deficiencies, for example. Many of us are deficient in things like magnesium, B vitamins, vitamin D, vitamin C, iron, selenium. I could go on. And what happens when we don't have these building blocks is that our hormone pathways aren't able to work at a high functioning rate. Our digestive system is stunted, our liver isn't working properly, our detox pathways aren't working, and even the building blocks to make those hormones are just not there. So today, I want to share what I believe to be a preliminary yet comprehensive list of labs to request when you feel like something is off in your body. I think that knowing our numbers is important, but I also believe that your health history is equally important. And as a full disclaimer, I do not believe that you need to wait for labs or that you even need to get labs to start making healthy changes today. Hormones are often the first messengers to throw up the white flag when something isn't working correctly in the body. Thankfully, these messengers are great at letting us know if something isn't right. We've got to listen to that intuition. We've got to listen to what's going on with our bodies. Now, in many cases, it's lifestyle that's causing these imbalances. Not all cases, but many of them. Definitely lifestyle was my case for sure. So focusing on healthy foods like grass-fed clean proteins and healthy fish, fiber from veggies and fruits, and healthy fats from avocados, olive oil, and almonds, along with supplementation, proper rest and stress reduction, and self-care will move you in the direction of hormonal harmony. I speak about each of these pillars in great detail in my book, The Essential Oils Hormone Solution, because they are needle movers in our health. So if you know you aren't getting labs ordered, or you don't have access to labs, or you're not sure your doctor's even going to let you order labs, and you want to start making changes today, definitely grab the book or listen into this podcast, because I have so many episodes fully devoted to those pillars so that you can begin to make changes today. Also, if your doctor is not willing to order these labs, or you don't have someone in your area who's willing to look at you in a functional perspective, I have resources at the end of this episode that I will be sharing if you want to order your own labs at home. With that said, if you are looking to get tested, here is what I recommend. I'm also going to be providing you with an incredible bonus today. It is my lab testing guide that includes information about each hormone along with lab normals for you to compare against. This lab guide is going to be a bonus. It's going to be in the show notes for episode 197. And all you got to do is click that link and voila, it opens up to a plethora of information on all of the labs that you could possibly want to look at and have a better sense of so that you feel educated going into the doctor's office and recommending what you know that you need. Now, it's no surprise that testing can be an important part in discovering hormonal imbalances and root causes inside of the body. One of my favorite hormone tests that really does a phenomenal job at getting to the root cause of what's going on is the Dutch test, which stands for Dried Urine Test for Comprehensive Hormones. This test is assessing reproductive and stress hormone pathways along with a lot of other indicators to show us what is going on all the way through those pathways. Not just looking at the total hormone in the blood, but also how we're using it in the body. And it's also important to look at these metabolites, and that's why I love the Dutch test as well. Now, there is a laundry list of hormones inside of the body, but the ones that I generally recommend to focus on are our sex hormones. That's progesterone, estrogen, testosterone. Our insulin, clearly insulin is such a critical hormone. When I think about the hormone hierarchy, insulin and cortisol are at the very top. So I want to know what's going on with insulin. Your adrenal hormones like cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, DHEA, and then your thyroid hormones, which I'll go into detail in just a moment. Now, it's no surprise that all of these hormones are deeply interconnected and rely on each other to keep your hormone levels balanced and to keep your body functioning at peak capacity at any given time. Now, although the medical community has developed what is accepted as a normal range on labs, it doesn't account for your unique history and your genetic makeup. What is normal on paper may not be normal for you. And so with my lab guide, I give you what we consider to be functional normals. They tend to be much tighter normals because it's a much more narrow margin of where we want the body to be functioning. Sometimes in the medical institutions, the normals are just too wide and it could seem like things are great when it's very clear something isn't okay. So just a heads up on that as well. Now, what I want to do is share with you what I consider to be preliminary lab tests for women 30 plus. Again, women in their 20s can absolutely take these labs as well, but my area of expertise is oftentimes women in their 30s, their 40s, and their 50s, and that's oftentimes where I see women start to be concerned about what's going on with their hormones as well. Now, ask your doctor or your integrative and functional doctor to order the following. First, most important, because we just want to get the baseline of what's going on, is a complete blood panel. Very easy to order. It's just a little box to check. It's always great to look at what is going on with the complete blood panel. Next, I want to see thyroid tests because who knows, we have so many people, millions of people undiagnosed with thyroid conditions all the time, including myself, that I always think it's a great idea, especially as we enter into our 30s and our 40s, to be looking at thyroid levels. So you want to look at thyroid stimulating hormone, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, and you want to look at the antibodies as well. So the TPO-AB antibodies and the anti-globulin antibodies as well. So you want the full panel. And again, it's also inside of the guide that I'm going to share with you and inside of my book, The EO Hormone Solution. Next, I want you to get the Dutch test. Now, when it comes to the Dutch test, I want to make sure that we're measuring progesterone, and it's important that we measure on a very specific day. Now, if your cycle is 28 to 30 days, then you want to test on days 19 to 20 of your cycle. So that's after ovulation, day 19 to 21 of your cycle. Basically, it's a week before the first day of your period. If your cycle is longer or shorter, adjust that based on the week prior, basically 6 to 7 days prior to the first day of your menstrual cycle. That's when you want to look at the Dutch test because that's when your progesterone levels are going to be the highest and we'll get a great sense of what's going on with your progesterone levels. Also note that the Dutch test is going to be looking at an analysis of 35 different hormones, including all of the types of estrogen metabolites, looking at estrogen pathways, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, cortisol, So much more is going on here. We'll also be looking at an oxidative stress marker, melatonin, the 6 organic acid test. This particular test, the Dutch test, just goes through a gamut of testing. And what I love about it is it really, not only can it pinpoint things like estrogen dominance or maybe even start to show us what's going on with PCOS, but it also begins to show how these hormones are connecting and working together. So I love this test. You can order it on your own as well. I'll be sharing details on that in just a second. Next, I want to look at luteinizing hormone and follicular stimulating hormone, typically tested on day 2 or 4 of your cycle if you're cycling. So during your menstrual cycle, your menstrual period is when we would be testing for that. Fasting insulin and glucose tolerance, LDLs, and hemoglobin A1C. Again, I want to see what's going on with your blood glucose levels and your insulin levels. I have found that a lot of our hormone disruption comes from when our insulin levels are completely deregulated, and that can happen for a number of reasons. So I want to take a look at that. I know that if we can look at that earlier, we could really get an indicator of what's going on with our metabolic resilience and our cellular capacity. Next is growth hormone. I want to take a look at that as well. Then I want to take a look at vitamin D, that's 25-hydroxy vitamin D, vitamin B12, and folate, which is vitamin B9, and then the C-reactive protein, the HSCRP test. Again, this is an inflammatory test to look to see if there's any level of inflammation in case we need to dig deeper into that. Now, the goal for these preliminary tests is to get a baseline for what is going on in your hormone pathways and your metabolic pathways, which, by the way, are also hormone pathways. These tests can determine a lot and may have the answer you're looking for. So these are all the tests that you may even need. However, these tests, because they are preliminary, they may lead to needing extra labs, specifically looking at your gut, looking at toxins, looking at other nutrient deficiencies, and looking at metabolic markers. Now, if that's the case, you're working with someone who wants to dive deeper, this preliminary set of testing will allow them the information to actually go deeper into it. Now, note, as I mentioned before, this testing may actually give you all the answers that you want, and it may just be that you need an extra supplement to manage your adrenals or your HPA axis. You may need an herb, or you may need to supplement with a nutrient deficiency. Maybe you've got a vitamin D or an iron deficiency. It just depends on what's going on, and that may all be what you need. Also, we can tell with some of these labs if your liver needs more support or your gut has issues or you're dealing with things like estrogen dominance. So that's going to be super important. These labs are going to give you lots of data, and then the doctor who's working with you should be able to take it that next step depending on if the solution is there or if they want extra testing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I recognize that those are a lot of tests. I totally understand. So that's why I wanted to make sure that you have this really amazing reference guide that you can use as a resource. For a complete list of lab tests, test descriptions, optimal ranges for each test, just head over to drmarisa.com/lab tests, or just go to the show notes for episode 197, click that, and voila, it opens it directly up to everything that you need as well. Now, if your doctor won't order these blood tests, salivary tests, urine tests, because it's a combination of all of those things, you can order them yourselves. You can actually go to the Dutch test website and order your own Dutch test. And you can also go to another lab that I really love, ZRT Labs, which is zrtlab.com. It can be found online, and you can order a full thyroid panel along with other hormone tests as well. You can order a metabolic panel. You can look at specifically stress hormones. You can look at, all different types of hormone tests specific to the issue or area of concern. Luckily, with today's technology, you can order your own tests if you can't find someone who will help you. And the Dutch test company will pair you with someone who can read those results, because I will tell you, the Dutch results are not easy to read. As practitioners, we have to go through training to actually read the Dutch test. So I can imagine if you had not looked at tests before, it can be hard to interpret those. And I even think ZRT Labs have practitioners that can actually look at tests. The point of today's episode is really just to give you a preliminary look into what women should be ordering, what we should be looking at for women when it comes to metabolic, hormone, insulin, across the board, just getting a baseline of what's going on. So often I feel that our requests are ignored, that we don't have clarity about what we want and what we need to ask for. And after all of the research that I've done in terms of what is preliminary testing that can kind of give us a great framework, a great baseline for where to work, this is going to be the testing that I recommend. So when I do a full set of labs, these are all the tests that I'm running when I'm doing a full set. And usually that's at least once a year. Some of these tests I run multiple times a year, especially my thyroid test. I run 2 Dutch tests a year. If my D levels are lower than normal, I'll definitely be checking my D levels more often. And so again, some of these tests you may not need for more than once a year. Some, depending on what's going on with you and what the situation is, you may need more of them throughout the year, especially if they're really kind of getting optimal levels for you dialed in so that your body is working and functioning properly. I just want to say thank you so much for stopping by and listening into the Essentially You podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me on Instagram or Facebook. And again, the best resource I can provide you right now is the lab reference guide that I've created for you, and then also my book, The EO Hormone Solution, where I actually list out, I think it's on page 24 or 29, all of these tests that I mentioned today. On the next episode, I am bringing on Dr. Kristen Race, who is going to be sharing with us how to manage your brain chemistry during times of stress and worry. Now, I'm really excited for this conversation because I absolutely believe that a couple of our root causes are stress and trauma that lead to just a slew of issues that go on if that level of stress and trauma just compounds over time. So if we can get to the root cause and really change that brain chemistry, then we really have the ability to manage those two areas of concern. So Dr. Race, this is her expertise. I'm super excited to have her on, especially many of us, we're feeling heightened worry, heightened concern, heightened unknowns and stress. And I think this is a great time to be having that conversation. So I hope you join me next Tuesday with this interview. And until then, have an amazing weekend.